My name is Margaret Hill. I live in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of Naperville, Illinois, where the lawns are always freshly mowed and every mailbox looks the same. From the outside, you'd think my life was picture perfect, a beautiful home, 2 wonderful children, and a husband who everyone said was the kind of man every woman dreamed of. For a long time, I believed that too. I used to wake up before sunrise, make coffee just the way Daniel liked it, 2 sugars, no cream, and watch him read the morning paper while our kids got ready for school. Ethan, our oldest, was 16, loud and full of dreams. Lily, my youngest, was 13, gentle and shy, the kind of girl who still held my hand when we crossed the street. Those mornings were my favorite part of the day. They made me believe everything in my world was exactly as it should be, but life has a way of hiding cracks beneath the surface. It started with little things. Daniel's phone calls in the middle of the night, the sudden business trips that seemed to come from nowhere, and the way he started locking his study door when he worked from home. I didn't question him at first. I was a wife, after all, and wives trusted their husbands. That's what I told myself. But sometimes, in the silence after he left for work, I would walk into his study, run my fingers over his desk, and feel something off, like a faint scent of perfume that wasn't mine, like a whisper that didn't belong in our house. I tried to ignore it. I told myself I was imagining things. I kept smiling, cooking, cleaning, pretending. Because when you've built your entire life around someone, the truth becomes the one thing you're most afraid to see. Daniel passed away suddenly, a car accident on a cold November evening. I still remember that night vividly. The wind howled through the trees, the rain hit the window like 1,000 tiny fists, and the phone rang just as I was setting the table for dinner. "Mrs. Hill," the officer said, his voice careful, almost rehearsed. "There's been an accident." The words blurred after that. I dropped the phone, fell to the floor, and the world went quiet. So quiet that I could hear my own heartbeat echoing in my ears. They said it was quick, that he didn't suffer. I wanted to believe that. But part of me, the part that had once trusted him blindly, whispered, what if there's more? Weeks turned into months. The house felt too big without him, the silence too heavy. I spent my days trying to keep things normal for the kids. Ethan became quiet, spending hours in his room. Lily cried herself to sleep some nights, holding one of Daniel's shirts, and I just felt lost. People came and went, offering casseroles and condolences, whispering kind words they didn't really mean. "He was such a good man," they'd say. "You were lucky, Margaret." I smiled and nodded. Because that's what widows do. They smile, they thank people, they pretend they're okay. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something about Daniel's death, or maybe his life, wasn't what it seemed. It was a crisp February morning, almost 3 months after the funeral, when the first letter arrived. I remember it so clearly because it was a Sunday, and Sundays were always Daniel's favorite day. The mailman left it in the box like any other envelope, but this one had no return address. Just my name, Mrs. Margaret Hill. The handwriting was neat but unfamiliar, like someone trying too hard to look calm. At first, I thought it was another sympathy card. People still sent them sometimes, though fewer and fewer each week. I opened it slowly, sitting by the kitchen window where the light spilled across the table. Inside was a single piece of paper, no greeting, no signature, just one sentence. "He wasn't the man you think he was." I stared at the words for a long time. The handwriting trembled slightly, as if the person who wrote it was nervous or guilty. I flipped the envelope, checked for any clue, but there was nothing. No sender, no location stamp, just a faint smell of old paper and ink. My hand started to shake. For a moment, I almost laughed. It had to be a cruel joke, maybe a mistake, maybe someone else's mail. But when I looked again at those words, "He wasn't the man you think he was," a chill ran down my spine, because deep inside, I knew something had always been wrong, and now someone else knew it too. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the old clock in the hallway. Every sound felt louder, sharper, almost deliberate, like the house was trying to tell me something. I kept the letter under my pillow, like a secret I wasn't ready to face. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw those words glowing in the dark. By morning, I made myself a decision. If there were more letters, if whoever sent it wanted to tell me something, I would find out who they were, because for the first time since Daniel's death, I wasn't just grieving, I was curious. And curiosity, I've learned, is a dangerous thing when you've got nothing left to lose. The next morning, the house felt heavier than usual, like the air itself carried a secret I wasn't supposed to know. The letter sat on the kitchen counter, folded neatly beside my coffee cup. I had read it a dozen times since last night. Every time I looked at those words, "He wasn't the man you think he was," something inside me twisted tighter. I wanted to throw it away. I wanted to pretend it didn't exist. But curiosity has a strange power. It doesn't whisper, it pulls. So instead of tossing it in the trash, I slipped it into my purse before leaving for work. I work at Maple Ridge Elementary, the same school where Lily studies. I handle the library, a quiet job, surrounded by stories that end better than most lives do. That morning, I was shelving returned books when my friend Clara, the school counselor, walked in. She's the kind of woman who can sense sadness like a bloodhound. "Hey, you okay?" she asked softly. "You look like you saw a ghost." I smiled faintly. "Maybe I did." Clara tilted her head. "Bad night?" I hesitated. "Just something weird happened. I got a letter yesterday." She raised an eyebrow. "A letter?" "Yeah, no return address, just said, 'He wasn't the man you think he was.'" Her eyes narrowed. "And you're sure it wasn't someone being cruel?" "That's what I thought," I said. "But," I stopped. I didn't know how to explain it. But there was something real about that message. Something too deliberate to be random. Clara sighed. "You've been through a lot, honey. Maybe it's just someone's sick joke. Don't let it get in your head." I nodded, even though it already had. When I got home that evening, the sky had turned the color of bruised clouds. Ethan was at basketball practice. Lily was upstairs doing homework. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. I made myself some tea, sat by the window, and stared at the street outside. Clean driveways, tidy mailboxes, kids on bicycles. Everything so normal, so safe, and yet I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, somewhere, was watching me. At 7 p.m. sharp, there was a knock on the door. My heart jumped. When I opened it, no one was there, just an envelope lying on the doormat. My hands started to tremble again. The same beige color, the same handwriting, no return address. This one had more than just one sentence. It read, "He told you he was in Chicago that night. He wasn't. Ask him about Route 9. I sat down slowly, my pulse pounding. Route 9. I knew that road. It was a long, winding highway about an hour from here. Quiet, rural, mostly farms and gas stations. Daniel used to travel it on his business trips. My first thought was denial. Maybe this was some mix-up. Maybe someone was playing with me. But my second thought was much darker. What if the person who sent this knew something the police didn't? And what if I'd been living a lie for years without ever realizing it? I spent the rest of that night searching through Daniel's old things. His drawers, his study, even his car keys that still hung by the door. In the bottom of his desk, under a pile of old tax documents, I found a small black notebook. Daniel's handwriting filled every page. Numbers, dates, short notes that made no sense to me. But on one page, something stood out. June 14th, Route 9. 9 were p.m. Don't forget the key. I froze. That was 3 months before the accident. And Route 9 again. What key? And why write it like that? No details? No context? The more I looked at that page, the more uneasy I felt, because Daniel wasn't the kind of man who forgot things. He was meticulous, careful, the kind of person who labeled spice jars alphabetically. So why hide this? I didn't tell anyone about the second letter. Not even Clara. Something in my gut told me that whoever sent it wanted me alone in this. The next few days passed quietly, but not peacefully. Every knock on the door, every sound outside made my heart race. I started checking the mail twice a day. Nothing came. Then, a week later, on a windy Thursday morning, I found another envelope in my mailbox. It was slightly wet from the rain, but the handwriting was still clear. This time, the letter said, "He had another house, Margaret. Check the address, 1420 Route 9. I read it over and over until the words blurred. Another house? No, that couldn't be. But my hands were already reaching for my phone. I opened Google Maps, typed in the address, and waited. The screen loaded slowly, pixel by pixel, until the image appeared. A small white cottage surrounded by tall pine trees. No name, no number plate, just silence. The next morning I told Ethan I'd be home late. Parent meetings, I said. Then I drove. Route 9 stretched endlessly, winding through cornfields and quiet farmhouses. The air smelled like rain and mud. I gripped the steering wheel tighter the closer I got to the address. When I finally reached it, I parked across the road and stared. The cottage was old but well kept, curtains drawn. A red pickup truck in the driveway. Someone lived there. I sat there for a while, my heartbeat echoing in my ears, and then the door opened. A woman stepped out. Mid-40s maybe. Blonde hair, a pale blue sweater, holding a cup of coffee. For a moment, I thought she looked familiar. But then she turned, and I saw her face clearly. She wasn't a stranger. I had seen her before, at Daniel's funeral. She had been standing near the back, watching quietly. I'd assumed she was just another one of his co-workers. But what was she doing here, at a house that the letters told me belonged to him? I didn't confront her. Not yet. I sat there until she went back inside, my hands shaking. When I got home that night, I found Ethan asleep on the couch, his textbooks open beside him. Lily had left a note on the fridge that said, "Love you. Mom, don't stay up too late." I smiled faintly, trying to hide the tremor in my chest. I went upstairs, pulled out the letters and spread them across the bed. 3 letters. 3 truths I didn't want to see. He wasn't the man you think he was. He lied about where he was that night. He had another house. 3 steps into a past I thought I buried with him. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. That night, before I turned off the light, I whispered into the darkness, "Whoever you are, I'm listening." Because if someone wanted to tell me the truth, I was finally ready to hear it. For days after visiting the cottage on Route 9, I couldn't think about anything else. The image of that woman, the blonde hair, the calm expression, the coffee cup in her hand, haunted me every time I closed my eyes. I kept asking myself the same questions. Who was she? Why was she living in that house? And why did she come to Daniel's funeral if she wasn't just a friend? I needed answers. The Calet was a Tuesday night when the phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. "Hello?" I answered softly. Silence. Then a faint, shaky breath. "Mrs. Hill?" The voice was female, quiet, unsure. "Yes." "Who's this?" Another pause. Then she said something that made my skin crawl. "I think we should talk." "About Daniel." The line went dead. I stood there, frozen. The phone still pressed to my ear. That voice, I knew it. It was her, the woman from the cottage. My heart raced as I stared at the screen. The number still glowing, 872-555-9034. For the rest of the night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound in the house felt like footsteps. Every shadow looked like a secret. The next morning, I called the number back. No answer. The 4th letter. 2 days later, another envelope arrived. Same paper. Same handwriting, but this one had a faint red fingerprint on the corner, like someone had rushed to seal it. Inside, the message was longer. "You deserve the truth." Her name is Anna Reed. She loved him too. Anna Reed. The name hit me like a cold wave, because suddenly, I remembered. Daniel had mentioned that name once, years ago, when he was consulting for an architecture firm in Chicago. "Anna Reed, one of the new project coordinators," he'd said casually over dinner. A little disorganized, but smart. I hadn't thought twice about it. Until now. The search that night. After the kids went to bed, I opened my laptop and searched the name Anna Reed, Illinois. Within seconds, her face appeared, a professional profile photo on a local real estate site. Same woman. Same soft eyes and calm smile. The page said she lived in Lincoln County, the same county as Route 9. My stomach twisted. The pieces were starting to fit together, too perfectly. The drive back the next Saturday, I drove back to Route 9. This time I parked closer to the gate. It was early morning, gray fog still floating over the fields. A for sale sign leaned crookedly near the mailbox. The curtains were open, and there she was again. Anna Reed, packing boxes into the truck. Something inside me pushed forward before my fear could stop me. I stepped out of my car, heart pounding, and crossed the road. She looked up, startled when I said her name. "Anna Reed?" Her face went pale. She froze, the box slipping slightly in her hands. "Who are you?" she whispered. "I'm Margaret Hill," I said. "Daniel Hill's wife." For a second, the world stopped. "Oh my God," she breathed. "You're real." She looked like someone had punched the air out of her. The conversation We stood there for a long moment before she motioned me. Inside, the cottage smelled like lavender, and old coffee, a life half lived and half abandoned. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said quietly. "I didn't even know he was married until it was too late." I stayed silent. My throat felt dry. She went on, tears gathering in her eyes. "Daniel and I met 6 years ago. He told me he was separated, said you'd moved away." I felt my knees weaken. 6 years. That was when Lily was only 7. Anna looked down. "He used to come here every other weekend. Said he needed time away from work." I believed him. I loved him. I swallowed hard. "So why the letters?" Her eyes widened. "Letters? You didn't send them?" She shook her head slowly. "No, I thought you did. For a moment." We just stared at each other. 2 women connected by the same man, both fooled, both broken. The 5th letter. When I got home that evening, exhausted and shaken, the mailbox was already full again. Another letter. My hands trembled as I opened it right there on the driveway. "You're getting closer. But not close enough. He lied to both of you." I looked around, scanning the empty street. Every window, every car felt like eyes watching me. Someone was playing a game. Someone who knew everything. The tension at home. That night at dinner, Ethan noticed my distraction. "Mom, are you okay?" "You've been acting weird lately," I forced a smile. "Just tired, sweetheart." But Lily studied me with those quiet, perceptive eyes. "Did you get another letter?" she asked softly. I froze. "How do you—" She shrugged. "I saw the others in your drawer." For a second, I wanted to be angry, but when she reached out and held my hand, the anger melted. "Dad's gone," she said. "But whoever's doing this, don't let them scare you." I squeezed her hand, whispering, "I won't," even though I already was. The night visitor, that same night, around 1 a.m., I woke to a faint sound outside, like gravel crunching under footsteps. I got out of bed, heart thudding, and peeked through the curtain. A car idled across the street, engine running, headlights off. I couldn't see the driver. Then after a moment, the engine revved and the car drove away. I stood there for a long time, gripping the curtain, feeling the chill seep into my bones. Whoever was sending those letters, they weren't done yet. The call returns the next morning. My phone rang again, same number. This time I didn't hesitate. I answered. "Who are you?" I demanded. The same soft voice whispered, "You deserve to know the truth. But if you keep digging, you'll wish you hadn't." Before I could reply, the line went dead again. I sat there, phone still in hand, as a single thought echoed through my mind. If Anna wasn't sending the letters, then who was? The morning after the phone call, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee growing cold in my hands. Outside, the world looked perfectly normal. Sunlight filtering through the curtains, birds on the fence, a delivery truck rolling by. But inside me, everything felt wrong. It was like the world I'd known for 20 years had quietly rearranged itself overnight. And I was the only one who noticed. I couldn't stop replaying that voice in my head. "You deserve to know the truth. But if you keep digging, you'll wish you hadn't." The words had weight, like a warning carved in stone. But warnings don't stop you when your whole life has already fallen apart. They only make you hungrier for answers. The study, that afternoon, while Lily was at school and Ethan was out with friends, I went into Daniel's study again. The room still smelled faintly like him. Cedar wood and aftershave. His jacket still hung over the back of the chair, untouched since the day he died. I opened every drawer, every file cabinet, searching for something. I didn't even know what. Bills, receipts, folders labeled consulting work, Chicago. But buried underneath them was something different. A small metal lockbox. No label. No key. I turned it over in my hands. Heavy, cold. And right there, etched faintly on the bottom corner, were 2 letters. A.R. Anna Reed. My stomach dropped. The locksmith. The next morning, I drove into town and took the box to Miller's Hardware. Old Mr. Miller raised an eyebrow when I asked if he could open it. "Got yourself a mystery box, huh?" He chuckled, setting it on the counter. "Something like that," I said quietly. A few minutes later, he popped the lock open with a soft click. When the lid lifted, a faint smell of old paper and cologne escaped. Inside were several photographs, a set of keys, and a sealed envelope. The first photo made my heart skip. It was Daniel, younger, smiling, standing beside Anna Reed in front of the white cottage on Route 9. They looked happy, too happy. The second photo was stranger, Daniel again, but this time standing with a man I didn't recognize. Both were in suits, shaking hands in front of what looked like a construction site. On the back, written in Daniel's neat handwriting, were the words, "Lincoln Project. Keep this quiet." The envelope. I hesitated before opening the envelope. My hands trembled, as if they already knew what waited inside. Inside were documents, bank statements, property deeds, all under a company name I'd never seen before. Hill and Reed Consulting. Reed, Anna Reed. I sank into the chair, staring at the papers spread before me. So that's what he'd been doing. He wasn't just cheating. He was building a life with her. Another business, another house, another name. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was complete. The photograph, I almost missed it at first. A small photograph tucked between the papers. It was old and slightly torn. Daniel sat at a restaurant table, his hand resting on another woman's shoulder. Not Anna. This woman looked younger, maybe in her late 20s. Her smile was familiar in a strange way. I turned the photo over. On the back, in faint pencil, were the words, "To D, always us. E. My hands went cold, because I couldn't think of anyone in Daniel's life whose name started with E. The unknown connection. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, the photograph between my fingers. I tried to remember every person Daniel had ever mentioned. Co-workers, clients, friends, nothing. I typed the name Hill and Reed Consulting into my laptop, searching for any record of it. What came up wasn't a company website. It was a court document, a lawsuit, dated 2 years ago. The plaintiffs, Hill and Reed Consulting. The defendant, Eleanor Systems Limited, Eleanor.E. My breath caught. The case was over. Dismissed for insufficient evidence. But the names on the document made my head spin. Daniel Hill, Anna Reed. And a third name I hadn't seen before, Eric Donovan, the same man from the second photograph. Who was Eric? And why was he connected to both Daniel and Anna? The whisper. That night the phone rang again, same number. I hesitated before picking up. My voice was barely a whisper. "Who are you?" The woman's voice came again, calm, almost sad. "You shouldn't have opened that box, Margaret." My heart froze. "Are you watching me?" I asked, my voice trembling. "I'm trying to protect you," she said. "You don't understand what he was involved in." "What are you talking about? Who are you?" A pause. Then, barely audible, "Eric Donovan wasn't just his business partner. He was his brother." And the line went dead. The Discovery brother. That word echoed in my head like thunder. Daniel never mentioned a brother. Not once. I knew his parents, his cousins, but never an Eric Donovan. The next morning, I drove to the county records office. The clerk, a woman in her 60s, helped me search through public birth records. After 10 minutes of typing, she looked up at me, frowning. "There's a record for a Daniel Donovan. Born in 1967, Chicago. Donovan." I repeated. She nodded. "Yes, but the note says, adopted by the Hill family, 1973. I stepped back, dizzy. So Daniel wasn't even his real name. He'd lived his entire life under a lie. And if he changed his name, what else had he changed? The storm that night, rain hit the windows like nails. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the study in brief white bursts. I sat there, staring at the papers from the lockbox, the photographs, the name Donovan written across the documents. Everything I knew about my husband, the man I loved, the father of my children, was unraveling piece by piece. And whoever was sending those letters, they weren't exposing him to hurt me. They were trying to show me who he really was. But I wasn't sure anymore if I wanted to know the rest. The storm had passed by morning, leaving the streets wet and glistening under a gray sky. But the silence in the house felt heavier than before. The kind that presses against your chest and refuses to let you breathe. I hadn't slept all night. The documents, the photographs, the name Donovan, they kept circling in my head like a warning I couldn't ignore. Daniel Hill, or was it Daniel Donovan? I looked around the study again. Every picture frame and souvenir suddenly feeling like a piece of someone else's story. Not mine, not anymore. The call that changed everything. 8:07 a.m. My phone buzzed. A new message. No name. "If you want the truth about Daniel, meet me at 6 p.m. Lincoln Diner. Booth 4. Come alone." My first instinct was to delete it. But curiosity, that dangerous, irresistible force, whispered louder than fear. By evening, I found myself pulling into the parking lot of the Lincoln Diner, the same one Daniel used to stop at on his drives to the office. The neon sign buzzed faintly in the drizzle. Inside, a jukebox hummed softly, and the smell of burnt coffee filled the air. Booth 4 was empty, except for a woman sitting at the far end, wearing a long black coat and a scarf pulled tight around her neck. When she looked up, my breath caught. I knew that face. It was the woman from the photograph, the one labeled E, the hidden woman. She watched me for a moment, then gestured for me to sit. Her eyes were sharp, not cruel, but guarded. "You're Margaret," she said quietly. "And you must be E," I replied. She smiled faintly. Eleanor Marks." I didn't say anything. I just waited. "I worked with Daniel and Anna years ago," she said. "Back when Hill and Reed Consulting was more than just a business. It was something darker." Her voice dropped. "Daniel wasn't the man you think he was." My heart sank. "What do you mean?" "He and his brother Eric were running an investment front, money laundering for a developer named Carter Mills. When the deal went bad, Daniel tried to pull out. That's when everything started falling apart." I stared at her, speechless. "Are you saying my husband was involved in crime?" Eleanor nodded slowly. "He wasn't supposed to die, Margaret. He was supposed to disappear." The confession, she slid a small USB drive across the table. "What's this?" I asked. "Proof," she said. "Emails, contracts, photos." Daniel tried to warn me before he vanished. But then he turned up dead and Anna disappeared. "Disappeared?" Eleanor nodded. "You didn't hear? Anna Reed went missing 3 months before the accident." The words hit me like a hammer. I remembered seeing Anna alive just days ago. If she was missing, then who had I spoken to at the cottage? Before I could ask more, Eleanor's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, her face drained of color. "I have to go," she said, standing quickly. "You're not safe, Margaret. They're watching you too." And before I could stop her, she was gone. The drive home, the rain returned that night as I drove home, the wipers slicing across the windshield. Hands gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. I kept checking the rearview mirror. A black SUV had been behind me since the diner, keeping distance, never passing. When I turned left, it turned left. When I slowed down, it slowed too. My heart pounded. I pulled suddenly into a gas station, parking under the bright lights. The SUV kept driving, past me, around the corner, and disappeared. I sat there for a full minute, shaking. Something was wrong, very wrong. The USB drive. At home, after locking every door and window, I plugged the USB into my laptop. Hundreds of files appeared, scanned documents, bank transfers, photos of meetings, contracts with forged signatures, and then a video file, labeled simply Final Message MP4i. Hesitated before opening it. The screen flickered. Daniel appeared, sitting in his study, the same room I was sitting in now. His face was pale, his voice calm, almost too calm. "If you're watching this, Margaret, it means I failed. I tried to protect you and the kids. But they found out. About me. About Eric. About everything. I didn't want this life. I tried to leave. But no one leaves Carter Mills. If Anna or Eleanor try to contact you, listen to them. They know the truth, but trust no one else. Especially not Eric." The screen froze, then went black. The panic, my hands flew to my mouth. I could barely breathe. Daniel was alive when that video was recorded. Maybe just days before he died, and he'd known he was being hunted. I replayed the video twice, looking for clues. A date on the desk calendar behind him read June 14th. That was 3 days before the car crash. The stranger at the door. At midnight, I heard a knock, soft, deliberate, 3 times. My stomach twisted. I peered through the peephole. A man stood outside, drenched from the rain. He looked familiar. Gray coat, strong jawline, eyes cold as steel. When he looked up at the door, I knew who it was, Eric Donovan. I stepped back, my heart thundering. He spoke through the door, voice calm but chilling. "Margaret, open the door. We need to talk." I didn't move. "Daniel left things unfinished," he said. "You have something that belongs to me." My eyes darted to the USB still plugged into my laptop. I whispered, "You're not getting it," he sighed softly. Then his voice turned dark. "You don't know what you're dealing with. People have died for less than silence." When I looked through the peephole again, he was gone. The decision, I knew I couldn't stay there. Not with my children sleeping down the hall. I packed a small bag, grabbed the USB, and drove to my sister's cabin in Wisconsin, miles away from Lincoln County. The entire drive, I kept looking at the rearview mirror, half expecting that black SUV to reappear. It didn't, but the fear stayed with me. Heavy and alive. I didn't know who to trust anymore. Not the police, not the voices on the phone, not even the woman who claimed to be protecting me. All I knew was this. The truth about Daniel was much darker than infidelity. It was blood, money, and betrayal. And I was now in the middle of it. And somewhere out there, in the shadows between truth and lie, someone was still watching. The cabin was quiet, too quiet. It sat at the edge of Lake Mendota, surrounded by pine trees that whispered in the night wind. My sister, Nancy, had lent it to me after the accident, not knowing I'd come here not to grieve, but to hide. The kids were safe. I'd sent Ethan and Lily to stay with Nancy's friend in Chicago, told them it was just for a few days. I didn't tell them I wasn't sure if I'd ever be able to go back home. The weight of silence for the first few days. I tried to convince myself I was safe. I cooked simple meals, sat by the window, watched the rain. But fear doesn't fade when it's built on secrets. It just changes shape. Every creak of the floorboards made my heart race. Every rustle outside made me think of Eric Donovan, that cold voice whispering through the door. You don't know what you're dealing with. And worse, I couldn't shake the feeling that Daniel's story wasn't finished, that he hadn't just died. He'd been erased. The hidden folder one night. I connected the USB drive to my laptop again. I'd gone through most of the files before, or so I thought, but tucked deep inside a folder labeled Projects 2019 was another folder, hidden and encrypted. Its name, Echo. I hesitated before opening it. When I finally did, a series of photos appeared. Grainy images of people in suits, meetings in hotel lobbies, parking lots, cash exchanges, and in one of them, a man standing beside Daniel. Not Eric, not anyone I recognized. He was tall, bald, with a faint scar across his temple, and in the background of one photo, I saw something that made my blood run cold. It was the Lincoln Diner, the same place where I'd met Eleanor just days ago. The timestamp said 2 weeks before Daniel's death. The knock. It was just after midnight when I heard it, soft but clear. Knock 3, slow taps on the cabin door. Froze. No one was supposed to know I was here. I grabbed the nearest thing I could use as a weapon, a heavy flashlight, and crept toward the door. The knock came. Again. Margaret, a voice said, muffled by the wood. It wasn't Eric. It wasn't a stranger. It was a woman. Please. It's me, Eleanor, the visitor. I opened the door cautiously. The chain still hooked. Eleanor stood outside, drenched in rain, her face pale and desperate. How did you find me? I asked. They're coming for you, she said breathlessly. Eric knows you took the drive. He won't stop until he gets it. I let her in, locking the door behind her. She was shaking, clutching her coat around her. Eleanor, I said. Who's the man in these photos? The one with the scar? Her eyes darkened. That's Carter Mills. The name felt like a blade. The man Daniel worked for? She nodded. Yes, the one who started everything. The truth about Carter Mills. Eleanor sank into a chair and began to speak, her voice trembling. Carter ran a shell company, investments, real estate, everything dirty money could buy. Daniel and Eric helped him move the money through Hill and Reed Consulting. But Daniel wanted out. He threatened to expose Carter. That's when they turned on him. So, the accident wasn't an accident, she said flatly. They made it look like one. My breath caught. The floor beneath me seemed to disappear. All the sleepless nights, the strange letters, the calls, it all made sense now. Daniel hadn't died because of a mistake. He'd been killed. The recording. Eleanor reached into her coat and pulled out a small audio recorder. This was in Daniel's office the night before he died, she said. He left it for me to find. She pressed play. At first, just static. Then Daniel's voice, low, tired, but unmistakably his. If anything happens to me, it's because of Eric and Carter. Margaret doesn't know. Keep her out of this, Ellie. Please. I made my choices. Don't let them touch her. My heart cracked. Daniel had been trying to protect me, even in his final hours, but the damage was already done. The cabin break. And just as Eleanor was about to say more, A loud crash came from outside, glass shattering. We both froze. Someone was outside. She grabbed my arm. "Get down!" A flashlight beam swept across the cabin windows. Footsteps. 2, maybe 3 people. We crawled toward the back door, moving as quietly as we could. The front door rattled. Once. Twice. Then splintered open. I heard a man's voice. Cold. Calm. "Eric Donovan. Check the rooms. She's here," Eleanor whispered. "Go. Run to the woods. What about you?" She gave me a faint, sad smile. "I'll hold them off. You need to finish what Daniel started." I wanted to argue. To pull her with me. But the sound of boots hitting the floor stopped me. I slipped out the back door and ran into the dark woods, rain slicing across my face. Behind me, I heard shouting, and then a gunshot, the escape. I didn't look back. Branches scratched my arms as I stumbled through the trees, my breath ragged, my shoes slipping in the mud. I kept running until the sound of voices faded into the night. By the time I reached the highway, my clothes were soaked and my legs felt like fire. A truck driver pulled over, asking if I was okay. I lied, told him I'd been hiking and got lost. He dropped me off at a motel on the edge of town. As I sat there shaking, the truth hit me with full force. I wasn't just uncovering Daniel's secrets anymore. I was running from the people who had killed him. The photograph. Again at the motel. I took out the photo of Daniel and Eric again, the one from the lockbox. But now, looking closely under the lamplight, I saw something I hadn't before. In the reflection of the window behind them, faint, but visible, was another face. Mine. The photo wasn't from the past. It was taken outside my house. Someone had been watching us for years. The motel room smelled like dust and cheap detergent. I hadn't slept in nearly 40 hours. My hands were trembling, my clothes still damp, and the echoes of that gunshot still rang inside my skull. I didn't know if Eleanor was alive. I didn't know if Eric was still hunting me. But I knew one thing. I couldn't keep running blindly. Daniel had left me clues, and I had to finish what he couldn't. The files. I opened the laptop again, plugging in the USB drive for what felt like the 100th time. But this time, I noticed something new. A small, hidden folder named Donovan Estate. Inside were scanned letters, personal, not business, some addressed to Daniel, others written by him. The earliest one was dated 1986. It was from someone named Rebecca Donovan. "Danny, if you ever find this letter, I want you to know I never stopped looking for you. They told me you were adopted. They told me you had a better life. But I always knew you'd come back." Rebecca Donovan, his birth mother. I scrolled through more letters, each one filled with longing, regret, and a strange fear. The last one, dated just months before his death, sent chills down my spine. "He found me, Danny. Carter knows who you really are. Be careful. He's not just after the money anymore." The phone. I was about to close the laptop when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I froze. Then a text appeared. "You shouldn't have gone through the echo files. Check the mirror." My heart jumped. I turned slowly toward the mirror above the motel dresser. At first, I saw only my reflection. Pale, hollow-eyed, terrified. Then I noticed the corner. A small, blinking red light. A camera. The betrayal. I tore it off the wall and smashed it against the floor. My mind spun. Who had planted it? Then I remembered. When the truck driver dropped me off, he'd insisted on helping me carry my bag. He must have slipped it in. I dumped the entire bag onto the floor. Clothes, wallet, charger, and there it was. A second camera. They had been tracking me from the start. I picked up my phone and threw it into the toilet. Then I grabbed the laptop and USB, shoved them into a backpack, and ran. The safe house. I found shelter in a rundown building behind a closed gas station. There was no heat, no light, only the hum of rain outside. As I sat there, I opened Daniel's video again, the one labeled Final Message. I watched his face, looking for anything I'd missed. And then, in the corner of the screen, barely visible, was the reflection in the glass of his office door. A man standing just outside. Eric. He had been there when Daniel recorded it, maybe even when Daniel died. The call from the past, the next morning. I borrowed a payphone in a nearby diner and dialed the only number I still remembered by heart. "Nancy's," she answered, groggy. "Margaret? Where are you? You sound awful." "I'm fine," I lied. "Just Listen to me carefully. Don't tell anyone where the kids are. Not even the police. Not yet. Why? What's going on? They killed Daniel, Nancy. It wasn't an accident. Silence. Then, in a whisper, "Oh my God. Promise me," I said. "Keep Ethan and Lily safe, please." She hesitated, then whispered, "I promise." The visitor at the diner. As I hung up, I caught sight of a figure outside the diner. Tall, wearing a dark coat. I ducked behind the counter. Heart pounding. The man stepped closer to the window, scanning the room. When he turned, the fluorescent light hit his face. It wasn't Eric. It was someone younger, maybe early 30s, clean cut, sharp eyes, and he was holding a photo of me. The confrontation. I waited until he turned away, then slipped out through the back alley, but before I could escape, a voice stopped me. "Mrs. Hill?" I turned. The man raised his hand slowly. "I'm not here to hurt you. My name's Agent Ryan Keller, FBI. I didn't move." "Prove it." He showed me a badge. Genuine. "Why are you following me?" I asked. "Because you're in the middle of a federal case," he said. "We've been investigating Carter Mills and his associates for years. Your husband was one of our informants." My knees nearly gave out. "Daniel was helping the FBI?" Keller nodded. "He was gathering evidence. That's what the echo files were, our encrypted database. He was supposed to hand it over the day he died." My throat tightened. "Then why are they after me?" "Because they think you have the missing piece. The location of Mills' offshore accounts." I shook my head. "I don't." Keller's eyes softened. "Maybe not knowingly, but if Daniel trusted you, he left you something that matters." Sent the hidden code back in the safe house. Keller helped me examine the USB again. He pointed to one odd file buried deep inside. A document that looked like random strings of letters and numbers, but when he ran it through a decoder, words began to appear. Coordinates, dates, names, and then a line that made my blood run cold. "Final backup, Lake Mendota cabin, floorboard 13. The same cabin I'd just fled. Eleanor had said Daniel left her something, but what if I had been sitting on it the entire time? Returned to the cabin. That night, Keller and I drove back to the cabin in silence. The air was thick with tension. Every turn of the road felt like stepping deeper into a trap. When we arrived, the lights were off, the front door half open. We moved carefully, flashlights cutting through the darkness. Inside, the living room was trashed, furniture overturned, papers scattered. Then Keller whispered, "Here." He pried up the 13th floorboard. Inside the hollow space was a metal flash drive, smaller than a thumb, and beside it, a folded piece of paper. I unfolded it with shaking hands. "If you're reading this, it means I couldn't stop them, but maybe you can. The key to everything is in the name you trust least." I looked up at Keller. He met my eyes, expression unreadable, and suddenly, I realized what Daniel meant. The name you trust least. Eric. Or someone else? Before I could speak, Keller's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his face tightening. Then slowly, he said, "They know we're here." The cabin was silent, too silent. Only the creak of the old wooden floor beneath our feet, the faint whistle of wind through broken glass, and my own heartbeat, too loud, too fast. Agent Keller's phone glowed faintly in the dark. "They're coming," he whispered. "Who?" I asked, but I already knew the answer. Carter Mills, Eric Donovan, the men who had destroyed my husband, who had turned my family into collateral damage, and now they were coming for me. The trap. We turned off the flashlights and crouched behind the kitchen counter. Keller checked his weapon. Calm, professional, too calm. That's when doubt crept in. Who exactly was he? His badge was real, yes, but so was Daniel's smile. And look how that turned out. Daniel's note echoed in my mind. "The key to everything is in the name you trust least." My eyes flicked to Keller's ID card, still clipped to his jacket. Ryan Keller. The name felt too familiar, too perfectly placed. The crash, the sound of tires outside. Headlights swept across the windows, slicing through the dark. Keller whispered, "Stay down." A moment later, bang! The front door exploded inward. 2 men stormed in, flashlights blinding, rifles raised. Keller fired back, 3 quick shots. 1 man dropped. The other ducked behind the couch. I crawled toward the stairs, clutching the flash drive to my chest. Then a voice thundered from outside. "Margaret Hill! Don't make this harder than it has to be." Eric, the face of the enemy. He stepped into the doorway, gun in hand, face shadowed by the flickering light. "Put it down," he said softly. "You don't know what you're holding." Keller aimed his gun. "Drop your weapon." Eric laughed, a low, calm, terrifying sound. "You think she's on your side, Keller? You really don't know who you're working for, do you?" "What the hell are you talking about?" Keller snapped. Eric took a slow step forward. "The FBI didn't send you. We did." The revelation. Keller's hand trembled. For the first time I saw fear in his eyes. "You're lying," he said, but even he didn't sound sure. Eric smirked. "Check your messages. The transfer order came from my office. Your badge, your credentials, your entire assignment, all part of our design." Keller hesitated, pulling out his phone. One glance, and his face went pale. He whispered, "Oh my God." Eric raised his gun toward me. "Now hand it over, Margaret." The attorney looked at Keller. Betrayed, confused, desperate. He met my eyes, silently pleading for forgiveness. But forgiveness was a luxury I no longer had. I threw the flash drive into the fireplace. Eric cursed and lunged forward. The metal clattered into the ashes, half melted by the fire's edge. Keller turned his gun on Eric. "Don't move." Eric fired first. The gunshot echoed like thunder. Keller dropped to one knee, clutching his side. I screamed, grabbed the poker from the fire, and swung. The metal connected with Eric's hand. The gun flew across the room. He shoved me back, and I hit the wall hard. Smoke filled the cabin. Flames licked up the curtains. Eric lunged again, but this time, Keller fired. A single, clean shot. Eric fell. For a moment, all I could hear was the crackle of fire. The confession. Keller collapsed beside me, blood soaking his shirt. He looked up at me with pain and guilt. "I didn't know, Margaret," he gasped. "They used me. I thought I was helping." Tears blurred my vision. "You saved me," I said. "That's what matters." He shook his head weakly. "You need to finish this. The data, it's not gone. Daniel made backups. Cloud storage. Passcode is hidden in his ring." I frowned. "His ring?" "The one you kept," he whispered. "Look inside." Then his breathing slowed and stopped. The code. The fire was spreading fast. I grabbed the flash drive, burned at the edges but still intact, and ran outside as the cabin exploded behind me. The blast threw me into the dirt. My ears rang. My hands shook. But I was alive. Under the moonlight, I took off Daniel's ring, the one I'd worn around my neck for years. Inside the band, barely visible, was a tiny engraving. Echo Dawn 214. It wasn't just a code. It was a key. The final message. Hours later, I reached the nearest town and used a public library computer. I entered the phrase, Echo Dawn 214, into the FBI's secure data portal. It opened. Thousands of files, videos, and transactions, all evidence of Carter Mills's empire. Money laundering, murders, blackmail, everything. Daniel had done it. He'd gathered everything, and now I could finish what he started. I sent the files directly to multiple news agencies, anonymously. Within minutes, it was out of my hands, and within hours, the story was everywhere. Carter Mills, arrested. Eric Donovan, dead. Federal scandal exposed. For the first time in years, I breathed freely. The sunrise, I drove back to Chicago as dawn broke, sky pink and gold over the horizon. Nancy met me at the edge of the city. She didn't speak. She just hugged me. Hard. Ethan and Lily ran toward me, their little faces pale and tear-streaked. "Mom!" I dropped to my knees, holding them close. "It's over," I whispered. "We're safe now." But deep down, I knew something bigger had changed. I wasn't the same woman who once waited quietly for her husband to come home. I wasn't afraid anymore. Daniel had left me a legacy. Not of lies, but of truth. And now, that truth had set us free. The fire was behind me. The lies were ashes. But peace was still far away. In the weeks that followed, my name was on every news channel. Widow exposes corruption network. Mills scandal. The whistleblower's wife. I turned off every television. I wasn't a hero. I was just a mother trying to survive. After the storm, FBI agents came to my door every day. They called me Mrs. Hill now, not Margaret. Polite, professional, detached. They asked for statements, confirmations, details, every memory of Daniel, every secret I'd stumbled upon. But no one asked how I was sleeping. No one asked how my children were coping. And maybe they knew the answer because I wasn't sleeping. And my children were learning to live without innocence. The kids Ethan stopped drawing, Lily stopped singing. One evening, I found Lily sitting on the porch, staring at the horizon. She was clutching Daniel's photo, the one where he was laughing, holding both of them as babies. "Mom," she whispered. "Why did Dad lie to us?" My throat closed. How do you tell a child that the father she adored was both a good man and a broken one? "He was trying to protect us," I said softly, "but he got lost along the way." She nodded slowly, then said, "I'm glad you didn't." And just like that, I broke. The trial months passed before the trials began. Carter Mills was charged with over 30 federal crimes. The courtroom was packed, cameras flashing, voices buzzing. I sat in the second row, my palms sweating, my heart steady. When Mills entered, escorted by guards, he looked thinner, older, but those eyes still carried that smug emptiness. For the first time, he looked at me and smiled. That same smile Daniel once wore when he thought he could outsmart life. I met his gaze without flinching, because I finally understood. Evil doesn't always wear horns. Sometimes it wears a tie and calls itself family friend. When the verdict came, guilty on all counts, I didn't cheer. I just exhaled, like I'd been holding my breath for years. The letter I never sent. After the trial, I sat by the lake. The same lake where I'd once thought of ending everything. This time, I had a notebook in my lap. I began to write. "Dear Daniel, you were many things. My husband, my heartbreak, my protector, my betrayer. For a long time, I hated you for leaving me in the dark, for choosing secrets over love. But now I know. You were fighting for something bigger, and you never meant for it to destroy us. I forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because I need to breathe again. You taught me to fight, Daniel. You just never realized who I'd end up fighting for. Our children will know the truth, not of your sins, but of your strength. And when they ask about you, I'll tell them that once I loved a man who tried to save the world and almost lost himself doing it. Rest easy now. I'm finally home." I folded the letter and set it on the lake's surface, watching it drift away under the pink light of dawn. The past, floating out of reach. The unexpected visit a month later. There was a knock on my door. When I opened it, a man in a gray suit stood there, young, nervous. "Mrs. Hill?" "I'm Special Agent Reynolds." Keller was my mentor. My heart caught. "Ryan Keller?" He nodded. "He made a recording before everything. He wanted you to have this." He handed me a small drive. I hesitated, then plugged it into my laptop. Keller's face appeared, pale, smiling faintly. "Margaret, if you're seeing this, it means I didn't make it. I wanted to say thank you. You reminded me why I joined the Bureau in the first place. To help people like you. You turned pain into courage, and courage into truth. Don't let this end with revenge. Let it begin with forgiveness." The video ended, and I cried, not from grief, but from gratitude. The return life moved forward. Quietly this time, I reopened my bakery, Hill's Corner Cafe, the same place Daniel and I had opened 20 years ago when life was simple. Customers trickled in, some whispering my name, others pretending not to know, but I didn't mind. The scent of coffee and sugar filled the air. Again, Ethan helped me behind the counter. Lily played piano in the corner every Saturday morning. The world had turned cruel, but here, it still felt human. The forgiveness, one day. An old woman entered the cafe. She was frail, her silver hair tied neatly, eyes full of quiet sorrow. "Mrs. Hill?" she asked softly. "Yes? My name is Rebecca Donovan." The world tilted. Daniel's mother, the woman whose letters had started it all. She looked down, tears trembling on her lashes. "I wanted to meet you. To say I'm sorry. I knew what my son had done. I tried to warn him. I failed him." I stepped around the counter and took her hand. Her skin was paper thin, trembling. "No," I said, "you didn't fail him. You gave him love. He just lost his way." She smiled weakly. "You sound like him." We sat together for an hour. Two women who had loved the same man. Both scarred by his choices, both still standing. When she left, she pressed a small locket into my hand. Inside was a photo. Daniel, age 6, holding a model airplane. For the first time, I saw his innocence, and I knew I could finally let him go. The fire. Within that night, I stood outside the cafe, watching the city lights reflect on wet pavement. The air smelled like rain and sugar and rebirth. For years, I thought the fire inside me was anger, but it wasn't. It was life. It was everything I'd suppressed, everything I'd lost, burning quietly, not to destroy, but to remind me I was still here. I whispered to the night, "I forgive you, Daniel. And I forgive myself too." And for the first time, I meant it. The morning light fell softly through the windows of Hill's Corner Cafe. The smell of cinnamon rolls filled the air, mingling with the hum of quiet conversation and the sound of Lily's laughter from the back room. I wiped the counter with a towel and looked out the window. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the weight of watching eyes or the pull of regret, just calm. Peace was not a thunderclap. It was a whisper, and it had finally found me. The small-town life. We had moved to a quiet suburb near Madison, Wisconsin, far from the noise of Chicago and the shadows of the past. Ethan joined the local baseball team. Lily started giving piano lessons to kids at the community center. And me? I baked, I wrote, I lived. Every Thursday, I'd sit by the lake with a notebook, watching the water ripple against the shore. Sometimes I'd write letters I'd never send, to Daniel, to Keller, even to myself. I called it Therapy by Forgiveness, the book. One evening, as I was closing the cafe, a young woman approached me. "Mrs. Hill?" she asked shyly. "Yes, I'm from the Chicago Tribune. I wanted to talk about your story, about what you went through." I hesitated. For so long, I'd kept my story locked away, afraid of reopening wounds. But maybe it was time. We sat down at a corner table, and I told her everything, not the names or the crimes, but the heart of it. How a woman could lose everything and still find her way home. How forgiveness wasn't weakness, it was rebirth. A month later, she called me again. "Margaret," she said, "your story inspired so many women. Have you ever thought of writing a book?" I laughed softly. "No, but maybe I will." And so I did. The book launched a year later. I stood in a small bookstore in downtown Madison. The banner behind me read, "Letters from my past, a true story of love, betrayal, and redemption." People filled the aisles, strangers, neighbors, mothers, daughters. As I read the opening lines aloud, my voice trembled. "My name is Margaret Hill. Once, I thought my life ended with loss. But I learned that sometimes life begins where everything else falls apart." When I looked up, I saw Ethan standing proudly near the door, recording on his phone, and Lily smiling beside him, tears glistening in her eyes. And in that moment, I knew the story wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to everyone who'd ever survived heartbreak and built something beautiful from it. The unexpected letter. A few weeks later, a letter arrived at the cafe. No return address, no stamp, just my name, written in the same looping handwriting I'd once recognized anywhere. For a second, my heart stopped. It couldn't be. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper, yellowed at the edges. "If forgiveness is a fire, let it burn gently. Don't let it consume you. Let it guide you. You've done it, Margaret. You saved us all. D.H." I stared at the initials. Daniel Hill. Of course, it wasn't possible. But somehow, I smiled anyway. Maybe someone found it in an old file. Maybe it was coincidence. Or maybe, just maybe, love had a way of finding its way back. Even across the silence. The new love months passed, and with them came something I never expected: companionship. His name was Michael Turner, a local teacher who came to the cafe every morning for black coffee and oatmeal muffins. He never asked about my past. He just talked about books, music, life. Slowly, laughter returned to my mornings. Not the nervous, fleeting kind, but real laughter, warm and honest. One evening, as we closed up together, he asked gently, "Do you ever miss him?" "Every day," I said softly. "But I don't live in the missing anymore," he smiled. "That's a good place to be," and it was. The closing letter, on the anniversary of Daniel's death. I returned to the lake one last time. The air was cool, the water still. I brought with me a final letter, short, simple, and full of peace. "Dear Daniel, the kids are growing strong. The world knows the truth now, and I've learned to live again. You once told me love is a circle, that it never really ends. I think you were right, so this isn't goodbye. It's thank you. Yours always, Margaret." I placed it on the water and watched as it drifted away under a golden sunset. Behind me, I heard footsteps. Michael's. He stood beside me, silent, then slipped his hand into mine. For the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. The epilogue. Now, when people ask me who I am, I tell them this. I'm Margaret Hill. I'm a mother, a survivor, a woman who walked through fire and found her way home. And every morning when I unlock the cafe doors, I whisper the same words to myself, a promise and a prayer. Yesterday was loss. Today is life. Tomorrow is mine. The bell above the door rings. Laughter fills the air. And the story, my story, begins again.